Um, Hello, my name is Julia, and in this video, I will be commenting on my previous works for directing for film class. So, we'll be looking at the intentions behind the shots, how they were taking, and commenting on how they can be improved. And after that, after watching the three shorts, I will be exploring my current identity as a director, which is kind of non existent. But yeah, so let's go. For the first short, we were prompted to make a 1 minute short film to kind of sell ourselves as a director. As I have more experience with more linear stories and not really with reels and such, I decided to go with something with the short storyline. And while walking around, looking at locations, um, I got an idea about like a stalker kind of storyline. So we just shot a few scenes and later on, once I got to editing it, I realized there was actually not enough shots or actions to create like a compelling story, especially since it's only supposed to be 60 seconds. So there's not enough things that we could work on. So after that, during the editing, I decided to add a little bit more narration, which is basically what you see, what you hear at the beginning here. Um, we were supposed to not really rely on the narration, so I try my best to keep it as like as simple as possible. So yeah, the storyline was a bit more inspired by the location, if anything. uh there was little to no preparation for short number one. We had quite limited time, and I also had a lot of trouble figuring out what kind of director I was. So I just felt like I had to do something, uh, at least I can learn about what the kind of things that I default to and whatnot. So the main idea for the shot was actually to kind of create a POV style shot and kind of set up an atmospheric scene to make it a little bit more recreate like that POV stalkerish scene to kind of put the audience in the shoes of the stalker, if that makes sense. Hence the slightly more shaky cam vibes. Um, so, in terms of criticism, I believe that with a little bit more action or choreography, it could have made the one take could have been a little bit more interesting. Yeah, it's basically just the guy walking and someone kind of following him and whispering things. Another way I could have made this short or this story a little bit more interesting, I believe, is if I had actually shown the audience what the main character did not know. So basically, show both parties, the quote unquote antagonist, which is the stalker, and the protagonist, which is the guy walking, to kind of like showing both of them would kind of build tension in the audience because they know what the main character doesn't know, and that could have been a little bit more interesting, possibly from a story uh, point of view. Okay, so now we will go to short number two. So for short number two, we had to localize a scene of our choosing, and I chose the scene in Little Women where Amy and Laurie are discussing marriage. I rewrote the dialogue to fit the situation that was truer to my experience. As a girl who grew up in both Western and Eastern influences, I kind of relate to Amy in a way. Although our experiences and circumstances are different, I can relate to the whole ambitious but like stuck in a world where we have to consider marriage in order to sustain ourselves, secure our future in that way. I initially wanted to show the conflicts and defeat that the new or like my version of Amy felt, the conflict within her to choose to pursue like a modern career or to continue her family legacy and fulfill those duties that are part of her culture. While writing the dialogue, I wanted Amy to feel more defeated, more tired, kind of like on her last whims. Hence, the more static shots compared to the glory shots in my version, who was a little bit more emotional and the one who wanted to have Amy keep fighting a little bit more, and that's why I did. That's why I came up with those two like shot compositions, those two mise en scènes, where Laurie is doing something, is moving, and Amy is kind of like sitting there, not really doing anything. So in terms that leads us to the cinematography. So while Laurie's shots and movements did manage to work out, Amy ended up not really having anything to do. She's kind of like sitting there and waiting. If she had a little bit more choreography, or at least something else to do, or something more to do, I think it could have. I think it would have helped the conversation. I think it would have helped the dialogue come out a little bit more alive, a little bit more, made the scenes with Amy a little bit more vibrant. Um, well, overall, this short could work in some media formats, such as web drama. I believe it could have benefited from a few more close-ups of Amy, or me. I believe it could have benefited from a few more close-ups of Amy, gradually, maybe as she feels a little bit more hopeless about her situation. I also believe we should have taken a few more shots and maybe have done a few more rehearsals before shooting, before wrapping up. Some of the cuts, like here, for example, because there was action for Amy, but as you can see, um, over here, where like as she was reaching to get something, and also where Amy took out took a huff of the vape, and it cuts to Laurie and then cuts back to Amy kind of with the smoke coming out. Those cuts were actually covering up for audio issues and audio inconsistency issues, and I believe that like if we had taken a few more takes we could have easily covered it up. Another issue that I have with this short is the audio. I usually try to emphasize on getting really good audio, and I'm quite disappointed that I um, did not manage to capture like good audio for Amy. And yeah, I believe that if we had like monitored and taken a little bit more time with our shots and maybe planned the shoot a little bit better, we could have gone a few more takes and made the scene bit better, I would say. So now we're in short number 3. So for short number 3, the exercise was to direct actors, and the script we were giving was the fight scene in Midnight in Paris, where uh, Gil and Inez are fighting about his staying in Paris. So having seen the scene before, I did not want to simply like do a remake, and we decided to have the actors seated and make the scene a little bit more subdued as opposed to what happened in the film. This also made it easier for us to set up the 180-degree line and keep things a little bit simple, choosing to rely on the actor's delivery instead. Um, the decision to put Inez closer to the corner of the room was actually a conscious one, as we wanted to make it feel as if Inez was being cornered by Gil and his decisions. But after that, once the parents would come in, and then once the parents would come in from behind Gil, we wanted to make it feel like Gil was being trapped by Inez and her parents instead. And then and that's why he realized he had to leave. I wanted to specifically create that moment because during that moment, Inez's lines were back to belittling um, Gil, and I think it could have been quite interesting to show like the Gil's character development at that moment. So the execution on that part was a little bit poor on us. Um, we wanted to do it in one take, as we didn't really want to take extra time, or at least I felt like I had to work with the time we had been giving, and I didn't really want to take precious time from everyone. And yeah, so during this part, it was mostly in Gil's shots, but over here we kind of missed the actor a little bit, and previously before we missed Jeremy's line. which is the father's line. Here we missed this part a little bit. And that's something I kind of regret, because if we had taken a few more takes, we could have easily covered it up. Another thing I wish that we had worked on more was maybe to prepare props, or given something for the actors to do or to play around with as they were talking. Because watching and rewatching the cut, it felt a little bit like a theater piece recording, which is not bad. I believe we could have done better, especially with the talented crew that I was working with. Yeah. So after watching these 3 shorts that I've made for class, these are what I can and have noticed as my strengths and weaknesses. In terms of strength, I believe I have ideas on how and what I want things to look like. Due to my background being a little bit more in writing and books, I tend to look at characters and background motivations, which helps me visualize the story and the mise en scène a little bit better, and I can like set it up more effectively. This kind of also enables me to pay more attention as I try to take the time to understand the characters. This also enables me to kind of pay attention to details as I try to take the time to understand the characters at least. I also have a bit of experience in different crew positions, and thanks to that experience, I believe it can make it a little bit easier for me to find ways to communicate with the different crew members and build the vision as we understand the same language, so to speak. In terms of weakness, I believe my biggest weakness would be that I don't really have a direction on what kind of director I want to be. While I have a grasp on what I want to be and who I want to be, I don't really know what kind of director I am yet. And I think that stems from like inexperience in general. I also think I'm kind of inexperienced in working in film production sets, especially with cameras, lighting, the whole choreography, um, like doing the actual shooting of a film. While I am familiar with the set, it was not set for filmmaking, and there's a big difference there that I believe that I still need to kind of get more experience and learn. I also believe that I have issues with imposter syndrome, where I tend to give up a little bit too early because I'm not very confident as to how the shots will come out. Most of the short that I've made, even outside of this class, even before this class, I believe could have benefited from a few more takes, a few more rehearsals. Um, yeah, I also believe that I'm not familiar, or at least don't have an imagination that's flexible enough with how edits or transitions can be uh, inserted in between shots in order to be more creative with the shots. So I tend to resort to static shots or long takes. I also believe stems from me being a little bit more familiar with books and such. Like I've studied books, but I haven't studied films. I've studied, but I haven't studied filmmaking. I've studied films in terms of like philosophy, uh, philosophy ideas, etc., etc. Not really like the actual filmmaking. Another thing that I noticed looking back on set is that I end up multitasking when I should have been more focused on the task at hand. Example, during the directing actors short, I had forgotten to talk to the actors about the background story on the characters, like their motivation and whatnot. And if I had stayed and talked to them a little bit longer about that, I believe it could have helped them a little bit more with the nuances and intentions behind the dialogue. Overall, I learned that I need to take more time during the pre-production process, at least for my working flow or my working style. I need to prepare and put down things that I have in mind, put those vision on paper. Taking the time to prepare and rehearse can help me be more efficient on set, especially during in the circumstances that we are in, limited crew, limited equipments, limited time and such. um, Preparation could have definitely like helped out a lot. uh, I learned to value practice and rehearsals. I also learned how to use the equipment a little bit better, and also how to work and improvise with limited film equipments and crew. So more experience with guerrilla filmmaking, if I'm using that right. Um, I also learned and understood a little bit more in depth about what kind of role the director plays, and I hope I can apply that in the future. So, overall, in order to improve, I believe I have to spend more time preparing a lot, especially with working to bring the vision that is in my head to others, so to communicate better with the actors and crew, as well as making more floor plans, more storyboard, mood boards, and practice a way of communicating. I also think that I should get more experience shooting films on set and whatnot, as well as directing. Um, I also believe that I should watch more movies and actually study like the technique, the filmmaking side of the movies to learn with the different edits, transitions, as well as how they've gotten this shot, how they made this shot. I believe it can help me become more flexible in terms of editing. As having more visual references in my head can help me expand my editing library, which is something I definitely need to work on a little bit more. And yeah, that's all for me. Thank you for watching.